Around the world, there are factories making everything from bikes to biscuits, with mega machines mass producing and highly skilled workers handcrafting. They are the products we use every day. But have you ever wondered how to turn apples into cider? Or how to make the perfect black pudding? Or handcraft a classic sofa? Well, sit yourselves back as we go behind the scenes on the production line. When the sun's out and the beer gardens are packed, a glass of ice-cold cider is a popular choice. And in recent years, the drink's popularity has gone from strength to strength. Apple cider's roots date back a millennium. And we have the Romans to thank for perfecting and promoting this boozy beverage. And the modern technique isn't all that different. The Thatcher family have been making cider for over 100 years.
It's a true family business, owned and managed by the fourth generation of the Thatcher family. It's been run by the family since 1904 here at Myrtle Farm, and the successive generations have carried on running it, expanding it and learning about cider making.
And just like 100 years ago, it all begins in the orchard.
First part of a process of making cider is, of course, the apple. So we need to grow the apples. It's our basic raw material.
To be called a cider, it must contain at least 35% apple juice. And apple types at Thatcher's are named after pomologists, or apple experts, who developed the varieties.
So here we are stood in front of some Katy trees, and as you can see, they're laden with fruit, and they are just about ready for harvest.
And these specially developed apples are very different to your common garden variety. They're developed especially for their unique cider-making properties.
The difference between a cider apple and an eating apple is a high presence of tannin in those apples, just like red wine.
Tannin is an organic substance found in the stems, seeds and skins of many fruits, including apples. It's a natural preservative and so critically influences the aging process of cider.
So the Katy's a beautiful red apple. You know, when it gets the sun on it, it goes this lovely dark colour of red. And when you bite into it, it's really sweet, really nice to eat.
The trees take 6 to 7 years to fully fruit and have a productive life of around 40 years. This year's harvest is credit to very favourable weather conditions.
We had a good cold winter. The trees like that to help them shut down. We had no frost during blossom time. We had loads of sun through the summer. And luckily our ground here is quite deep, so the roots were down in some good moisture.
There are hundreds of apples per tree, and Thatcher's can harvest 150 tonnes a day.
Our season starts around about the end of August, and Katy is one of the first varieties that we harvest round about then. And then different varieties, they all ripen at different times, right the way through to the end of November.
Thatcher's machine harvests the apples. First, the trees are shaken using a tree shaker. With some orchards having up to 500 trees per acre, it's an invaluable time saver.
Obviously, machinery like this really makes us very, very efficient when it comes to harvesting apples, and we need to be to get them at the peak possible ripeness. So the shaker arm comes in, it grabs the base of the trunk of the tree, and then the whole machine shakes. And then the last few remaining apples which are on the tree fall onto the floor so we can collect them. The shakers don't damage the tree at all. If anything, they actually encourage a little bit of root growth. When we're shaking, it's really dramatic. You never ever get bored of seeing it. It's just all happening at once, yeah. And for us, it's the start of harvest, so it's good.
And as the saying goes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Next, a harvester, like a big apple vacuum cleaner, sucks them up.
Once the harvester's collected a couple of tons of apples into the hopper on the back, it takes it to one of the trailers and tops them up to about 12 tons. Then a tractor will come and take them straight into the mill, ready to be made into the cider.
Straight from the orchard, the apples are taken to apple bays, the largest one of which holds 100 tons. From the end of August until the end of November, the trucks deliver 450 tons of apples to the mill every single day.
Oh, it's a wonderful sight, isn't it? We love to see it. Every year, it just gets better and better. It's just a fruit reception bay. The apples can be brought here, stored for an hour or so until the mill's ready to take them, and then the apples are floated into the mill on a river of apples. Apples are very helpful like that. They just float, so we can move them really easily without damaging them, so that nice clean fruit gets into the mill.
After the apples have bobbed through the water into the mill, they can be washed. This removes any bugs, dirt or leaves that you don't really want in your cider.
They go across the wash table that you can see just below us. All the transport water is washed off with nice clean water, so only nice clean apples go over the edge of the rollers and into the mill. From here on, they're elevated up into a mill that chops them up into a very fine pulp, and then round into the presses.
The mash is pressed to get all the apple juice out. Thatchers have 5 hydraulic fruit presses.
We fill up the body of the press with apple mash, and then at the back there's a hydraulic ram that squeezes forward and presses the juice out of the apple. So if you've ever used one of the old-fashioned juice presses, it works just the same way, where you turn the handle and screw the press down and squeeze the juice out. That's exactly what's happening in here on a giant scale. So we can put 12 tons of apples into here all at one time. All the juice comes out of the blue pipe down at the front and away to be stored or fermented into cider. And only the skins and the pips are left behind.
Each press has a force of around 26 tons per square metre.
We're looking at the inside of the press here to see how it works. And inside there are 280 of these nylon tubes, each of which has got little holes in it, and that allows the juice to go out through the holes as it's squeezing, but it keeps behind all the skins and the pips and the stalks, all the solid. It's exactly the same as a sieve or a cafetiere for coffee. It's a way of keeping the solids on one side and allowing the liquid through and out the other side.
The bits of apple that are left over after they're pressed are called pomace.
Not pumice that you do your feet with, it's pomace with an O. It's a very good raw material for another process called anaerobic digestion. So we send that away and bacteria eat it up and convert it into a gas that can be burnt. And that gas powers an engine that makes electricity. And that electricity just goes back into the grid and feeds back into people's homes, eco-electricity.
The juice that's extracted from the apples during pressing is pumped into fermentation tanks.
We're standing on top of our fermentation tanks, about 40 feet up in the air, and you can see them spread out all the way behind us. And this is the really exciting bit as a cider maker. This is where we really get to do our stuff and turn the apple juice into cider.
Fermentation is the process of turning sugar into alcohol. To do this, thatchers add special yeast to the apple juice, which acts as a catalyst, turning it into cider.
Fermentation depends on the product we're making, so it can take anywhere between 7 and 12 days. It's a great process. We study it day in, day out and make sure all the fermentations are progressing exactly how they should be. And at the end of that, we get to taste the lovely cider.
After the initial fermentation, the cider sits in temperature-controlled fermentation tanks for around 8 days.
We're in the maturation building now, where we keep all our oak vats.
The cider is left to mature in these oak vats for around 6 weeks. The oak softens the tannins, enhancing the cider's taste. The vats are over 150 years old. The largest holds over 135,000 pints of cider. Now, time for a quick sip, just to check the taste, mind.
And first of all, I can feel that lovely peppery spiciness at the front and a lovely long-lasting sort of astringent tannin towards the end, so a lovely real full flavour profile.
Now for the final stage of the cider making process.
What you can see now is 30,000 cans of this size every hour going past. Ciders come from the other side of the site, from the great big tanks.
The cider is still flat, so to make it fizz, it's carbonated with 20 million bubbles in every can.
And then into the filler, where it's put into these cans here. Then we apply the lid to the top, seal it all together. Then it gets put into boxes of 10 and off to the supermarkets for cider drinkers to enjoy.
And now for a perk of the job.
Oh, the tasting on a Friday, I think, is the best part of the job. That's when we really see the fruits of all our labours and make sure everything's perfect before it leaves the farm.
No traditional full English breakfast will be complete without black pudding. It's a kind of sausage, except that you make it with blood, usually from pigs. It's been eaten for centuries, and dozens of different cultures and regions have their very own versions. Adding fat, oatmeal and seasoning to fresh blood, then stuffing it into an animal intestine and boiling it meant no part of the animal went to waste. It's not to everyone's taste, but it's even been hailed as a superfood, thanks to all the iron and zinc. They've been making it here at the Bury Black Pudding Company for over 100 years. It's an award-winning family recipe which has been handed down through the generations.
Back in 1973, my father was a pork butcher. He did just a bit of black pudding to use up, because pork butchers don't throw anything away. He found out about a competition out in France, sent off 2 black puddings in the post, and 2 weeks later he got a letter back saying he'd won the English part of the competition. And that's the start of the road of building a wholesale manufacturer rather than just a shop-based black pudding.
Black pudding comes in a horseshoe-shaped ring, a stick, or pre-sliced. And it all starts with dry premix that is brought in from Spain that contains the basic black pudding ingredients.
So this is the first part of the process of making black puddings. Here we have our premix that is blended off-site. In this, if I just pop it down, you can see we have all the ingredients that are pre-blended. So we've got dry blood in there, we've got flour, rusk, oatmeal, and we've also got our secret ingredients, which is our blended seasoning that makes Bury Black Pudding Company the black pudding it is.
Fresh blood isn't easy to come by, and the benefit of this premix is that it's already been heat treated to kill bacteria, and it can be stored for up to a year. Next, it's sieved and added to an 800-litre water tank and hydrated.
From the top there, the dry products comes through the pipework, through a sieve, goes into the water. It is then recirculated, coming through the pipes here, going round to get a nice blended mix. It has a revolution of 4,500 revs that just whips stuff up, and it really forms a nice, even, consistent paste.
Now the last 3 ingredients can be added. Pre-cooked barley adds texture and flavour. Each bag of barley weighs 10 kilos.
So we put about, how many bags is it, Sam? 12 bags. 12 bags goes into this mix. And you see, 1 bag at a time goes into the mix, and then we close the lid down. We use the high shear again, and it mixes blends all the mix together. So we've got a nice, even mix.
A high shear mixer has motorised blades which can cut and mix large amounts of liquids thoroughly in record time. Next, the pieces of chunky pig fat that add texture and juiciness. The pig fat has been diced and pre-cooked in an oven at 80 degrees.
That's now been emptied into the tray, and that can go into the mix. That's 2.5% of the mix. So we're very low on fat content, below 3%. We now start the rotation. We don't want to high shear it because it would absolutely just diminish it into nothing. It blends it around and through, so it spreads that 2.5% of fat through the product.
Followed by the final ingredient, fresh diced onions.
So Chris is going to pump the mix out now. He's actually pumping it out. There you go, Chris.
Each tubbing or bin takes 200 kilos of black pudding mix. That's about 140 black puddings.
And this will fill, how many does it fill? 4 tow bins this fills. So now we've got the mix that's been pumped out into the hydraulic lift. Go on, Baz. So the full process, he just takes it up. This is about 150 kilos in weight, and it will pour it into the top automatically.
200 kilos of mixture are poured into the black pudding sausage making machine. Not yet cooked, the black pudding mix is then encased in a plastic sleeve.
So the mix that was put into the filler here comes down using gravity, comes through the metal detection, so make sure we know metal in the product, comes down the pipe, is pushed through the pipe and comes through the clipping machine, and then it goes onto the rack with a tag showing the use by date.
The liquid mixture is now ready to be cooked.
So here we've got the rack that's been filled with the sticks that have been off the clipper. This is a stick there. You've got the tag that shows you the use by, and obviously you can use it with the mobile phone, so customers can put on the mobile phone the QR reader, and they can get recipes, take us to a website. You've got the product there with a good old Union Jack on it, and all the details. This goes all around the world. We export this to different parts of the world. What we do for the UK market is actually have one with no markings on. What happens with that, in our packing department, we store 45 tons of this, and we slice this each week, and we put 4 slices in a pack, and that goes onto the supermarket shelves in the UK. So both sticks cook the same, they're made the same, it's just a different sleeve. They go onto the rack, and the rack goes into the steamers here.
The mixture inside the sleeves is still raw. As it cooks, the blood coagulates inside, binding the ingredients together.
So the 3 guys here, they're going to push this. This weighs about 700 kilos in weight, straight into the steam oven. That's the first one in. Again, another 700 kilos in weight, so we're cooking 1.4 tons of black puddings, and it's about an hour and 20 minute, an hour and a half cook. Final push. So they put the ramp up, close the oven, and we switch on over on the far side. And we're on.
The black puddings are steamed rather than baked at 91 degrees, so they don't dry out. As well as the black pudding sticks, there's still an appetite for black pudding made using the traditional method, which they bake just next door. Now, brace yourself, it's not a pretty sight.
The traditional method is a much messier process. It's made by tying up with a string onto natural casing.
There are around 20 puddings per string, as the runner, made from the beef intestine, is one continuous length. The traditional pudding mix has slightly more pig fat than the sticks.
Very labour orientated. We've got to string every single black pudding up. As you see Graham here, he's not too bad at doing it, he could do better. So he's linking, and then he links to a set size. And this process has been going on for hundreds of years. And that's what it's called, a string of black puddings that then goes in the tote bin ready for cooking.
Too awkwardly shaped for the steam oven, instead these puddings are simmered at around boiling point. After cooking, they'll be cut and separated.
So this is a tablet, and we control all our cooking and cooling on the tablets. You've got here the steamers, they've got the 2 racks that we put in earlier, and we have probes inside the oven so we know exactly what's going on. It's showing on here, it's been at a temperature for a certain amount of time on a preset timer. It's now just clicked off the timer, and it's given us the light so we can now open the oven, the product's cooked, and we can pull the product out.
The black pudding sticks are cooled with water. When the traditionally made black puddings are cooked, they go into a blast chiller, where the air is at -7 degrees. Within 30 minutes, they'll be below 5 degrees. The black pudding sticks are ready to be prepped for the supermarket.
So as you see, the staff are moving the white sticks onto the table there. They'll now remove the white plastic sleeve, and then you've got the black pudding that's ready for slicing.
There are 48 slices in one black pudding stick. Despite the clearly visible pig fat, each slice contains less than 3% fat.
So you've seen the sticks of black pudding cut on the slicer. The slices come round, they're stacked, quality checked, which is very, very important. And then they go into the packing, and we have a pack of 4 slices that go out.
Now, seeing as it's cooked, it can be eaten straight from the packet. Although many of us choose to fry it first.
So today we've done 25,000 packs. This week we'll do about 120,000 packs. And over the year, we will do something like 6 million packs. That on the tonnage is probably about 200 tonne of black pudding.
The team can make sticks of black pudding 10 times quicker than using the traditional method. Finally, it's sealed in airtight packaging to keep it fresh. It's then dispatched to shops all over the world, including the original market stall where it all began. Black pudding, a culinary classic that's here to stay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
The great outdoors. Is there anything better than getting back to nature? But shunning our creature comforts can prove too much for some. Well, thanks to one ingenious invention, we can still enjoy a ready supply of hot water whilst out and about. Introducing the Gilly Kettle. Each one of these clever kettles is handcrafted by a small family firm following a unique design.
The Kettle Company was started about 19 years ago. We just, as metal spinners, just decided to make our own range of outdoor kettles. We had the tooling, which we inherited from another company, and it's just grown from there.
All it takes for a kettle full of hot water is a little firewood. The super efficient design heats water from a small fire in next to no time. They're called volcano kettles because the inside layer is shaped like, well, you guessed it, a volcano. They are essentially a double-walled chimney with water contained inside the chimney wall. And just like a volcano, the heat erupts through the central cavity, heating a much larger area than a flat-bottom kettle. And they all have a special feature.
It comes with a whistle to let you know exactly when the kettle has boiled.
This can be as quick as 3 minutes. Each kettle is made out of aluminium discs, forming the outer and inner chimney, the base, spout, and whistle. To make a Gilly kettle, it all starts with the raw material.
The first part of the process is obviously a circle of aluminium, which we buy in.
Aluminium is strong and durable, but it's malleable enough to be crafted using hand tools. The discs are formed into the correct shape by pressing the spinning plates against a mould using a former bar made of hardened steel. The lathe spins the discs at up to 2,000 revolutions per minute. Gillies use up to 1.5 tons of these aluminium discs each month. Alan starts by making the inner part of the kettle before moving on to the outer. Although they may look a little bit like flower pots, Alan knows just what he's doing.
Obviously, 2 different grafters for 2 different parts of the job. The outer drafting is slightly bigger because the inner drafting that I get the volcano shape for the inner part of the kettle is slightly smaller, and they go inside each other.
Both the drafts need to be respun and further shaped.
Let's finish the draft. He'll pass it to me, and I'll finish it off and make the outer for the kettle.
This is where the newly crafted draft takes on the final shape of the kettle.
We then put some tallow fat on it, just so the tool doesn't pick up. Then with the round part of the tool, we just spin it down. I've been metal spinning for about 44 years. You can normally pick up the basics after 6 to 12 months.
It takes 10 years of metal spinning experience to have the skills to make a ghillie kettle.
I could probably do about 130 a day of this part, if not slightly more. You then cut the bottom out of the chimney part.
The rough edges are then taken off the funnel of the kettle.
And that's it, finished.
So far, so good. But no kettle is complete without a spout, made using a Q cutter.
That goes in through there.
The bolt is tightened until the pressure punches out a disc of metal. And using a metal block called a die, the spout is hammered into the hole. More holes are drilled for the handle and tilting chain.
That's how we spout and drill it. We're going to make the inner part of the kettle and the inner drafting that Alan just done. We need to spin this drafting up to the top here to get the volcano shape.
The volcano shape will form the inner wall of the kettle. Steve pulls the aluminium disc into a long cone.
The outer kettle had a flange on the bottom of it, so the inner kettle has a flange, so we can virtually lock the two together like that.
Before he can fit the two pieces together, Steve needs to stretch the inner kettle to create a lip.
There's 5 or 10 mil of metal there I can pull back up to lift the kettle on at the top.
With the inner finished, it's time to add the outer section.
As you can see, it's spouted and drilled. So we then put the outer over the inner. And with a 2-speed lathe on slow speed, we first pull the front up, and with the end of the spinning tool, minding the spout, we lift the two together. Then we lift the two together at the top.
By forcing the excess metal at the top and bottom of the kettle together, they form a perfect seal.
We've now put the kettle together, we've drilled it, spouted it, put the inner and outer together. We've now got to take it over to my wife Maggie to rivet it.
I'm putting the billy ears on. I have to seal it first. The one at the bottom has got a ring, and that's where the chain connects to it.
Maggie uses a compound paste to seal the joints before steel ears are attached to it.
Right, now I'm using the air gun.
The bottom ears are for attaching the chain that holds the kettle whistle. The ears on the top are for the handle.
It's not a bad job at all.
Meanwhile, Alan makes the base of the kettle, a chamber where the fire burns which heats the water.
Well, they spin in the bases, obviously the same way we spin the kettles. They start off from a flat circle and we spin them. We then press a hole in, which gives the air intake for the kettle. And then we just Scotch-Brite it, clean it, and that's it.
Maggie gives the kettle a final polish before it's handed back to Steve.
I can't put the chain and the whistle on for one reason only. It's because I've got false nails and they're not very practical. But that's not a problem, somebody else can. And don't worry about the dirt, because that'll come off and your nails will still look lovely, ladies. So there you go.
But there's one job that Maggie's nails are perfect for.
Right, we've got the two labels here, one with a Gilly kettle and the other one made in the UK. And I shall place them on here and then people will know that it has been made in the UK.
Then it's time for Steve to add one more vital piece, a whistle.
We line the slit in the back plate up with a slit in the whistle. We line the two together. We put a 5mm bolt through and we screw the ball knob on the ends. And we tighten the two of them down with a screwdriver. And that's how we make the whistle.
Now it's ready to wrap and dispatch to all those thirsty campers.
First we insert the base into the kettle. We put the kettle in the centre. We wrap it in newspaper for two reasons. One, to stop the kettle from scratching in transit, and two, to give people something to burn when they first take it out the box. And it's ready to go into a box for shipping.
Gilly make around 5,000 to 6,000 kettles a year. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a cuppa. Chesterfield sofas, a design icon that exudes class. They can be found in homes all around the world. With their luxurious quilted leather upholstery, deep buttoning, low back and rolled arms, the Chesterfield is instantly recognisable. And they're hand-built from scratch by veteran furniture makers Robinson of England.
One of the big questions is always, what's the history of the Chesterfield? Sir Philip Stanhope, he was the Earl of Chesterfield.
Many believe that in the 18th century, the Earl of Chesterfield wanted a sofa with a straight back and sides so as not to wrinkle his clothes when he sat down. And the Chesterfield, they say, was created. Well, whatever its origins, it's an established design icon. It's all about the layers of upholstery when making a Chesterfield. And making one starts with the all-important frame.
We begin with the fundamental core element of any piece of furniture that we're going to craft, which is the solid beechwood frame. So here we have Michael. He is an exceptional joiner, but it's not just any joiner that would craft these types of frames, because it really is it takes a master craftsman. And it will take Michael around about a day and a half from start to finish to put the frame, all of the pieces cut out, put together.
The beechwood is grown in Denmark, Norway and Sweden, and Robinsons use 150 metres a month. The frame is dowelled, glued and screwed by hand before being taken through to the workshop to be transformed into a classic British sofa.
When the frame arrives here in the workshop, As you can see here, the first thing we need to do is web the frame up. We have to put the webs on to create a bed for the springs, because at the moment, if you have a little look, there's nothing behind the rails of the sofa. We have to fill that in with these webs, which are very tight, a great deal of tension. Everything we're using here are historic materials.
Webbing forms the foundation of most traditionally upholstered chairs and sofas. It helps the frame to bear more weight.
Once we've made that bed with the webs and we've got them both going vertically and horizontally, we're going to sew in the springs. The most critical part of the build of this sofa is these 8-point hand-tied loose coil springs. They're sometimes known as a double cone coil because at both sides they're wider than they are in the centre. So they're going to be sewn in squarely into the bed of Hessian, and then they'll be sewn through the centre of the springs and then around the tops of the springs. It's very time-consuming, you know, but again, in the 19th century, historically speaking, this is how furniture was made, and this is what we still try to do.
This two-seater Chesterfield, one of the most popular designs, will include 180 springs when it's finished, evenly distributed along the arms, the back and the seat.
I'm just stitching in the coil springs on the arms, stitch them in 3 times. Just one in the top and one in the bottom and one in the side, just to keep it square and straight. Where you'd lash them in up and down, vertical, side to side, just before you would stitch them into the Hessian again. So it'd actually be tied in 9 times each spring, really. You just know from experience, tie them in, and as long as you're creating the shape of the arm, everything else should fall into place.
It takes a whole day just to sew in the springs, so Michael's probably ready for a sit down. Unfortunately, there's a long way to go yet.
This is where what we call lash in the springs. We've sewn them in at the base of the spring. Now we're tying them in at the top of the spring, and we're going to tie them through the centres of the spring as well, as you can see there. So the aim of it is obviously to keep them square.
The base of the sofa is covered in springs in exactly the same way. And so you can't feel them when you take a seat, the webbed springs need to be properly covered.
Once they're all tied in, you can see we've started to put a layer of Hessian over. So this layer of Hessian is obviously going to stop any horsehair, any materials falling into the springs. We've got to create this lovely flat bed as smooth as possible. So again, the Hessian is sewn in by hand here. You can see there at the top, so that it keeps it all steady, all in place for years to come.
Once the sprung arms are covered with Hessian, it's on to the next stage, stuffing and padding the webbing.
So this is actually the bristle of wild boar, and it's been rubberized and sliced. Now this gives us all of the qualities of horsehair and loose horsetail, but with a much greater ease of use. And then we're going to re-sew this twine through the boar's bristle, and then it's stuffed underneath the stirrup. So we make, eventually, a very, very smooth covering of horsetail all around the piece of furniture.
The materials are sourced from the Netherlands and are specially chosen because they don't absorb moisture. But fitting them is not a quick job.
To put it into perspective, our quickest sofa takes 6 working days to make. If we hand dye the leather 6, this particular piece will take around 11 working days to make, and then with a fully hand-tacked piece, it takes 21 working days.
And to ensure it's comfortable, another layer of upholstery is added.
I'm just putting needle cotton felt on.
A black sheet of linen is stretched over the padded webbing and stapled to hold it in place.
And then we're going to mark out the buttons on the black linen with chalk
Once the seat arms and back of the sofa are fully covered in fabric, it's time to get ready for the addition of those classic Chesterfield buttons. The first step is to work out where the leather-backed signature buttons will go.
With the buttons, what you do is you work from the centre. So you would drill a hole every 6 inches from the centre until you work all the way around, and this is exactly what is going on here. I'm trying to find the hole, which I've managed to find it there with ease, because sometimes it isn't. And then you'll notice the needle comes out for the top row buttons down the side. There'll be roughly 300 buttons in a full sofa. It takes a lot of time, but if I measure 6 inches from there,
Every single button that's used on every single Chesterfield is made using traditional methods. It can take as long as 8 hours to make the 300 buttons needed to create this Chesterfield. Apart from being a part of the iconic look of the Chesterfield, the buttons have a practical purpose too. They help the leather pleats stay taut.
We're getting to a pivotal part and we're going to start putting the leather onto the sofa. The type of leather that we use is the raw leather. This is the top 1% of all the world's upholstery leather. It has to be the very, very, very best quality. This piece that Matty's cutting out now is going to go on that arm of the sofa. We've seen it built up, and now we're going to start to button it. Now, we don't use templates, so we don't work to strict patterns. Everything is freehand. So Matty's going to do this by eyes.
The sofa is covered with the leather, and Matty has to locate the pre-drilled holes where the buttons need to go to keep it in place.
At the moment, I'm just busy deep buttoning, putting all the pleats in place, getting the tension on the leather.
Deep buttoning can take up to 4 days.
You have to have a very steady hand.
The buttons are fed through the sofa upholstery at regular intervals and stitched under tension at the back. They help form a pattern of deep, stuffed, padded pockets. Now, the leather can be dyed. All the pieces start as raw leather before they're coloured. Powder-based dyes are mixed with water to create the desired colour.
There's no automation to this process, hence why it takes up to 21 days to craft a single piece. That is how the chair will finish. So at the moment as the dyes go on, it's going to look quite flat in colour, but then we fix the dyes in place so that we don't get any watermarks, and then we put the sealers on and we finish it with a French polish, so shellac, which is the light lustre that you can see on this piece here.
The studs are another essential part of the signature look of the Chesterfield. They also conceal where the leather joins up and further secures it. These sofas are built to last. Robinson guarantee their new sofas for up to 50 years. But they recently restored several that were crafted nearly 200 years ago.
The pieces of furniture that we're crafting here are very much legacy pieces. So we want 100 years. We want these to be passed down in generations to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And they're probably going to go up in value as time goes on. It's great British craftsmanship.
So far, so good.